Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the Patron Hangout discussion of Shindig, which Lani and I just watched about an hour ago. That rewatch is available down below if you'd care to. Oh, and I hear myself, and there we go. Now it's muted. So what this is there's a Patreon for the channel, and if you're in the $5 and up tier, every 2 weeks we get together and talk about something mutant enemy. Eventually it might be something else, and maybe we'll do we should do some holiday stuff. That might be interesting. Anyway, yeah, words. Before we get started, Sara has a couple of requests. Sara and Lani are the moderators in chat today, and Sir Jack will be back in 2 weeks, and I'm making sure that he's staying current on the show. So, yeah, but I believe everyone here today has seen every episode, so this is a fully spoiled discussion if you're in chat, but I'll let Sara go ahead. Kind of keep it. I kind of, the rule of thumb is people who join the video call. Sorry, Russell, but beyond that, it just becomes a challenge to kind of establish. There's always gonna be someone who has not, and lack of spoilers can be a challenge. I don't think Firefly isn't too spoiler dependent anyway, except for the movie. But we'll get into that. Go ahead. Right. No spoiling the movie. Yeah. Oh, hold on. I just got a message from Russell saying no audio, and he is correct. Oh, we were getting audio from me, but not from the meeting. Sorry, can you give me some test audio?
This is me speaking now. Can you
There
hear
we
me?
are. We're fixed now. So yes, there was a discussion of whether there were going to be spoilers, and I think we're not going to spoil the movie, but a sort of an open discussion of the episodes is on the table.
Yeah.
Thank you, Russell. Fixed now. Go ahead, Sarah.
So generally we want to keep things as, an enjoyable stream. So we ask that you not be rude about anybody in the stream or in the chat. And this includes, this is not a place for your thirst. So we just say no commenting on people's appearance. And then the other thing is just in terms of how the chat flows in the chat thing. Lani and I will be keeping an eye on it. If things wander into places that make it less pleasant for everyone, we may ask you to, drop a subject or something like that. Basically, just listen to the mods. Do not argue with the mods, or you will get the hammer.
Okay.
And now we have lost Ian's audio.
Okay, can we hear Ian? I can hear him in the other room.
Sorry, that was me. Yeah, that doesn't count though. I'll just shout and relay what I'm saying.
Right, I'll just tell everybody.
Before we get started, is there anyone who might need to drop out early? I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Lani, I feel this particular episode sort of deals in motifs and stuff that is not, I don't know what my wheelhouse is, but I know that this is not my wheelhouse. And specifically the Austin stuff. And I can't remember if it was you or Sara E who brought up the Austin stuff with me before I made the Shindig video. I think it was you.
It wasn't me.
Okay, yeah.
It wasn't Sara E? Then it might have been me. Here's the thing. People tell me all the time that I've said a thing, and I have no memory of saying the thing, but it sounds like me. So if Sara's not owning it, then it's probably me. Yes, I mean, I can definitely see how I would have seen the Pride and Prejudice connections in this episode.
Yeah, well, we actually watched the right one this time.
Yes.
And that's one
I
thing
managed to watch the correct episode this week. Yes.
That's one thing I find interesting is that the legacy of Fox airing the show out of order continues to affect
Mhm.
people, affect the show to this day, because it's not strictly a
Mhm.
matter of Blu-rays and DVDs, but air date is such a common
Mhm.
metric for this kind of thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
where does this episode land for you in the bunch, and in terms of the Austenness of it? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is at the top for me. And what I find really funny is that when I'm talking about episodes of a TV show that I love or a movie that I love, I usually find I don't have as many interesting things to say about it because I'm just like, no, it's just awesome. And that's it. I love this episode. Of course, I love Jane Espenson. So like Jane Espenson is basically my favorite flavor of anything. And so whenever she writes an episode, it's pretty much, made to delight me, so like, I love everything about this episode. I love
Remind me
the
some
relationship.
Buffy Jane Espenson episodes. Just
Band Candy.
okay, never.
yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lani.
So I really I love the connection of the Austen stuff in there, that like it has a Pride and Prejudice sort of vibe. We have Atherton Wing, who is somewhat maps to like a Wickham or a Willoughby, like the guy who seems really great and is good looking and charming, but also like underneath it there's a darkness there. I kind of like that. And I love Kaylee in the pink dress. I think that's like one of my favorite things is, the way that Mal dismisses her reach for that femininity and then makes it up to her by buying her the dress. I thought that was really nice. There's a lot of stuff in here that I love.
It's kind of fascinating. Like, first of all, I have to admit that when Atherton pops on and says, "Now there's the smile that's made of sunlight."
Sorry.
I might have a moment. I think I have experienced like a half a moment of like, ooh. Oh, and I don't know if it's the accent or what it is.
It's he doesn't have the floppy hair, but like that line is a classic floppy hair douchebag line. Like yeah.
Lately, I'm fascinated on why the Oz van scene worked so well, and why there are so many mutant enemy scenes that you can have a lot of fun in a car. It's not about getting somewhere. Shut up, Riley.
Sorry. I literally can't stop myself from having the reaction.
But
there's something about that good-looking, charming, like Seth Green is able to bring to Oz and to Oz's lines like a very grounded and connected performance. So I don't know if it comes down to the performance or if it's that like some of the writing, like the Scott Hope Buster Keaton scene, of course, is a classic example of this. Everything that Parker ever says ever is also like the floppy hair douchebag thing. Yeah. Riley has big floppy hair douchebag energy in the beginning. And I get that from Atherton Wing too,
There's two guys who talk about particular books that are their comfy blankies, and one of them is Emily Dickinson.
Oh God.
And the other one is
that's Owen in the first one, and Never Kill a Boy on the First Date.
What's the one?
Yeah.
What is the book that is the comfy blankie from the Freshman?
From the Freshman? Oh, that was of Human Bondage.
Human Bondage.
Human Bondage.
Is your comfy blankie book?
There's a whole theme of pretend. There's a whole theme of pretentious that going on in this episode, and boy does Atherton sell that hard.
Yeah.
Just the name from the beginning, but then everything that Lani is talking about with these guys that are Austen, practically, Austen created this character, I swear, or at least if she didn't create it, she codified it, where they're charming and they have just the right smile and everything they say sounds great until you start actually thinking about it for 5 minutes.
I would name him Mr. Elliot. I think
yes,
that's the Austen character that he is. Maybe Mr. Crawford, but I think most Mr. Elliot.
I'm not sure if for the uninitiated Austin folk like myself, we should try and bring us along, or we'll just let you guys run with it.
That's a character from Persuasion who is a pretentious jackass trying to appear charming, but yeah.
And it's almost like, and to mix our metaphors here a little bit, it's almost like you have this moment when you're listening to the things that he's saying, like that there's the smile made of sunlight, and it sounds charming. And then you have the ham sandwich moment later when you're standing there at 3:00 in the morning going, that was the cheesiest, crappy ass come on I've ever heard.
I mean, I reflexively dislike him, but I'm just saying, like, maybe I'm a sucker for accents. Like the gulf in Buffy, to me, excluding Tara and Willow, because Tara and Willow have a number of nice moments, but there's something about the straight white guys on the show, like from Oz to Spike, there's a gulf in between of just the cringy, romantic, terrible, like Parker's. We're supposed to be seduced by Parker along with Buffy in order for that episode to work on all of the levels that it needs to work on. And so they do the thing that I love in Buffy of sort of giving the villains truth, where Parker talks about, you feel like you look at history and it's people that are just swept up in events they can't control, but I don't believe that. You always have a choice in everything you do. And that is Buffy, the philosophy of the show. It's Whistler's dialogue from Becoming Part 1. Bottom line is, you're not ready for the big moments. They're going to come. It's what you do afterwards that counts, right? And yet it doesn't really work. I don't know anyone who's like, God, Parker's so dreamy in that particular bit. It still comes off as slimy,
But I can picture myself in my 20s, like when I was that naive as Buffy, falling for it. It's sort of like double vision of, oh crap, I can see what's happening, and I can see that if it was in this,
the hole
I would be
in the sidewalk because you stepped in it, right? Like once you stepped in that hole in the sidewalk, you recognize it from then on, and it's floppy haired douchebag.
Yes.
And to be fair,
yes,
these guys, the first time through, the very first time you watched the show, before you knew they were floppy haired douchebags.
I love how that's the catch.
Parker, you didn't really see it coming unless it's happened to you before, I would guess.
Sure.
But if you knew that type of person, you were expecting it. But for those of us who are lucky enough not to associate with people like that, okay, Parker's seems to be pretty cool. Okay. And then, you thought this was meant, a commitment? What, Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing we're as ever, I've immediately dragged a conversation about Firefly into Buffy, and that's my bad. I apologize. Or do I?
We've been watching it lately, so we're just in a Buffy.
I was planning on it anyway, honestly, because I wanted to be in on the other ones, but I especially wanted in on this one because I'm still mad we don't have confirmation about how much malt beverage was at that party.
At the Shindig party?
Because the only other reference to the word shindig in the entire Whedon verse was Oz.
I was thinking of that today.
Dead Man's Party, where he's saying, gathering is brie, mellow song stylings. A shindig, dip, less mellow song stylings, large amounts of malt beverage.
I could only
got two.
Where's
my confirmation of how much malt beverage was at that party?
By the way, Neurosophy, hopefully I said that right, in chat says, it actually gets me when they play Biff Naked's The Lucky Ones before they bone. Yeah, I gotta admit,
that's a great song.
That song's just like I'm grunge or alternative was right in, I'm Buffy's age, So I graduated when Buffy graduated. So that music, I get a little swept up in that. But again, it's a little bit of a cheat, right? You can cheat in editing. I know I can cheat with music. I can cheat with my voice and just drop into. Now we're having the serious part of the conversation in this Buffy video, and now I'm telling a joke, right? Like there's the theater of performance is so affecting emotionally, and I know that Biff Naked song gets me, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, they're kind of cheating. No music in the Oz bit, I don't think, other than maybe a Christoph Beck like tap on a piano key here and there. That moment is pure writing and pure performance of the two of them in that bit. So I'm with you, Neurosophy. That I get swept up in that ballad too. I enjoy that song. Lani and I have some contrasting parts in the Venn diagram of our musical overlap, and that's one of them where I'm just like, yeah, but don't you love this song? No.
No, the song is good. That scene has made me hate that song. I blame that scene. The association with Parker Abrams has made me hate that song. Now I can't even. Every time I hear it, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Valid.
I simply.
Go ahead, Sarcy.
No, please finish your thought.
No. I was about to segue away.
I was going to say, when you were talking about like, I'm going to tie two things together. When you were talking about, you can cheat with music, you can cheat with your voice. I mean, to a degree, that's sort of right what Parker's doing, or like you could argue the difference between Oz dropping a line and Parker dropping a line. Oh, Lonnie's gone. Is in the same way that the difference between you cheating with your voice or you being sincere with your voice is just that, it's sincerity. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's, there's the smile made of sunlight. Is like, are you true? Is that just like how you talk because you're trying to be sweet, or is there, that you're putting on a front to some degree? And I think, and that's palpable, and I think it's that simple in the sense that Oz is someone who is so without pretense that even if he says, stuff that coming out of someone else's mouth might seem really like, corny, it doesn't have as much of that weight because he's such a there's no pretense, there's no performance for him. But like with Parker, I mean, you can even in the performance of the actor, you can tell like, oh, he's used this line before. It's not about him saying, I want to share this intimate, philosophical belief I have with you. It's, I know what this line is going to do. And you can see that in the same way of, look at the smile made of sunlight. It's just, people who have pretense, people who don't.
Well, I think the way I think of what you're describing is authenticity. Oz feels authentic. Where Parker and Atherton, which to me are the two associations across the two shows, feel like performative vulnerability as opposed to authentic. Go ahead, Lady Eternal.
I was just going to say that also to build on that point, both in what you're talking about, Ian, about authenticity and what Sara was talking about, is that you see that line with that interaction with Atherton, that initial interaction, and then immediately you're cutting to Mal being behind her, having come down to tell her, oh, by the way, it's going to be 10 o'clock in the morning when we land.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't have a timepiece that would tell her that.
For the record, we're both Sara, not Sara.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Sara. I apologize.
Only Sara's in here.
My apologies. But my impression of that scene, his part of it is literally he just came down there for an excuse to flirt with her. And that scene between them was an authentic flirtation, whereas what Atherton said was specifically designed to be charming. There's a difference between being charming and being flirtatious. And there's somewhere in there's a degree of authenticity that I think it's a sharp contrast between the two of them that sets up the contrast that you see at the party as well.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
One thing, I mean, to be broad here.
Go ahead. No, yeah.
It's so hard. This is kind of the inevitable byproduct. I apologize.
It is what it is. We gotta live with it.
I was gonna say, I mean, I'm posing a thought, an open-ended thought to the group. But like to that end, we're talking about authenticity. That's kind of one of the themes that the episode is talking about, or is, you know, to so many degrees, right? The authenticity of this entire society, the authenticity of Mal's righteousness versus Atherton's. I mean, even bringing Kaylee into this, like, so there's a lot of that, and my, you know, specifically having to do with different, in addition to like different like femininities and masculinities. And I will just like pose that thought and you know, come back later.
Well, and dovetailing off of that, one thing I've been thinking about, like, I don't want to get into the argument about the feminism of Buffy, or like Buffy as a feminist parable or whatever, but like, just from the perspective of, I think that when you examine culture, and when you there are a lot of representations of powerful. We got Lani and I brought this up the last time about powerful femininity. You know, Cordy is one example. Buffy's another example. Willow is another example. But one thing I find interesting about Mal is I think something Buffy lacks a lot of times is examples of healthy masculinity in a shifted culture, right? Xander is intended to be that. He doesn't work as that anymore, but intended to be the male character that doesn't need power, that gives up power, because I think was part of the intention of Xander at the time. But there are more commonly represented on Buffy, there are examples of masculinity that is toxic, unhealthy, or needs to be removed. Quentin Travers, the on the nose sexism, you're a girl, you know, people slapping Buffy's butt in Anne. There are many representations of that. The thing I find interesting is that Lani and I touched on this in the rewatch. Mal is an example of a man who acts in a bad way, but the text is aware of it, which is lacking with Xander sometimes. And in this particular episode, the way he refers to
Inara.
Inara, thank you. Her name just went right out the window. Gets called out during the episode. His perception of himself, well, I'm all right. You know, it done humorously, but is nonetheless kind of a representation of self-awareness that is lacking in some of the other characters. So Harris, let me throw to you to give you at least give you a chance, if you don't want to joust with us, to kind of weigh in. Like, is Mal a representation of, if not healthy masculinity, self-aware masculinity, and why does he work? Why does he doesn't? Or if you don't want to go in on that, then I just wanted to give you a chance to speak.
No, yeah, I can chip in on that. I also want to say it's a good nice segue that you use the word joust, because I've not brought a jousting lance, but I've brought my sword with me in case anyone did want to challenge me. Whoops, to a duel. So I'm ready on that front. But no, yeah, I think that's kind of alludes to what I said last week about Mal's kind of characteristics. It's he acts in he has these different layers to him, which all the characters are meant to represent, and the way he portrays, the way he acts and carries himself is deliberately, protective. Like he's gone through this trauma, and his trauma coping mechanism is to paint himself in a particular way. But we do see the moments throughout the series where he lets his kind of, I mean, the best example I think is probably in the opening, the cold opening of our Mrs. Reynolds, when he's wearing the dress, and he's absolutely not at all embarrassed or shamed or anything about it. He owns it completely. So, you know, he's that is antithesis to the idea of toxic masculinity, to embrace any kind of femininity.
Even his like I swear by my pretty floral bonnet that I will end you. It's sort of an embracement of it that it feels refreshing. I mean, we can get into the idiosyncrasies of it, but it does feel different than, or perhaps a version of something that was lacking on Buffy.
Yeah, but then obviously when he generally does feel vulnerable, I think that's when he then kind of he kind of then tries to paint himself as something he maybe generally isn't. So he obviously consistently feels vulnerable with Inara. He says as much throughout the series, and in the film, that Inara represents the kind of his very potent kind of confusion, his weak spot. And I guess that's why he then decides he's gonna take the toxic masculinity part of him, which presumably does exist to an extent, because it exists in most men, and those who are looking up to be aware of it try to like,
Jane.
you know,
I mean, yeah.
well, yeah. So Jane, yeah, exactly.
Assuming all the characters are a representation of part of his personality, Jane is there, which is nice then that the show acknowledges with a completely distinct character that, yes, this is an aspect of Mal, but, you know, he's attempting to balance and to process all of those, the process of individuation of each one of them. Sorry, Harris, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just the Jane as the acknowledgement of that popped into my head.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was basically my point on that question. I think Mal's sexism is deliberately there because he wants people to dislike him to a degree and different people to dislike, because he doesn't want that attachment. That's his consistent thing. He pushes people away even though he holds this family around him. And I think that's, I mean, it's not obviously positive or great, but then as he pointed out, the text of the show isn't trying to tell it.
Yeah, that he's intentionally alienating. Does anyone else want to go ahead, Lady Eternal?
There was something that, you know, when Harris is bringing up about the intentionality of it, there was always some sort of a dual nature to that. You know, what would you do with that dress in that rig on the ship?
Dual.
Thank you. Yes. But the thought that ran through my head is that part of it is that he resents the yearning that Kaylee has, and the conversation that that Zoe and Kaylee are having that seems to validate Inara's lifestyle, because he's resenting a part of that. And so he's he's calling that out. But there's also the part of me that Kaylee, if Kaylee is his idealism, the idealism that largely was killed by the war, the idea that she's dreaming of what she can, you know, this beautiful dress and being able to have a lifestyle like Inara's and all the rest of it. And he is kind of slapping it down like, you're a mechanic on a spaceship. What are you going to do with that dress? That's unrealistic that you should need that or want that or be dreaming of that. That's not the life you've chosen. That's not the life you're in. And at the same time, Kaylee's character is coded, and we see this almost explicitly. The most explicit confirmation we get of it is in Out of Gas, but Kaylee's character is very much coded that the planet that she comes from is subject to a lot of scarcity. Her father can't hardly ever get work. She focuses on the mangoes and the strawberries and things like that. Like, she yearns for things that were not there for her, like things that she heard about other people having but were not there when she was a child. That she views that as a fairy tale. And Mal almost was trying to slap that down, saying, no, you need to live in reality. Yes, you can see it now, but because you're on a spaceship, but you still don't have access to it. And you need to stop pretending that you will.
It's interesting, too, that he brings her and not his first officer to the dance in and of itself, which I think is a nice show don't tell acknowledgement of his inner voice and sort of what he's grappling with in that particular situation. But yeah, I love the strawberry visual as access to society and access to wealth and access to the comforts of society, and her kind of craving for it. It validates the use of the straw. I've heard criticism of the strawberry sequence in Serenity. And I think the giant bowl of strawberries in this and her lust for it validates that sequence from Serenity really nicely. And the single strawberry that Book bought his way on the ship with versus the giant bowl as a way of differentiating the society that they're traveling among. It's very interesting in that particular way.
Interesting little trivia thing here. Apparently, Jewel State hates strawberries.
Of course she does. Yeah.
They call it acting.
Yeah.
Well, apparently she also hid a dress, so everything is a lie.
The dress.
The big fluffy.
Yeah, the big hoop skirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would not be fun to wear for sure.
No.
So,
actually,
as much as we're a bit of a love fest in this, I have some criticism
of the episode. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love. There's a lot about it that's really lovely, but there's a reason to me it's not Jane Austen. Is because it like it's sort of like a lovely soap bubble. Because I think a lot of there isn't a lot of depth when you really think about certain things, especially when you compare it to. The reason I wouldn't compare it to Jane Austen is because what I come to Jane for is societal critique. The romance stuff is nice, but that's not even the point of her books.
Right.
That's just the only thing that, women's narratives could be about. But it's more about like the societal critique and some of the sisterhood. And I find that lacking in this. Like there's some attempts, but okay. So the thing that I really picked out in this episode is that there are numerous mentions of slavery.
Yeah,
but it's in the same kind of way that like Gone with the Wind would mention slavery. We don't see them. We don't see who the slaves are in this world. And in fact, what we get is, so in our world, usually the way slavery operated, particularly if we're talking about something like chattel slavery, is there's a distinct visual difference between the people who got enslaved and the people who didn't. And even in any kind of class hierarchy, there's some kind of thing to clearly mark out who is and who isn't. But the signifiers that we have for all of that in our world are just kind of jumbled up in the presentation of it in Firefly's world, and they don't give us what the alternative is.
Right, I was going to say it feels like an incomplete idea in that it highlights bad, 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 wrong, 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 but does not then offer or contrast like, so then what?
Yeah, and it's a really, I think that they're using it because they're trying to have it be a theme, because the idea is that Atherton wants to treat Inara as a slave. But there's no roots to that, because that's not what the plot actually resolves around. She doesn't make a change as to what her decision would be about Atherton in this thing. And also like the whole thing about when women would contract themselves as courtesans, the way that he is offering to her, that survival sex work, that's a distinct power relationship that women entered into because they needed it, because they needed that protection. Inara doesn't need that protection. They tell us at the end, they save until the end,
take his offer anyway,
that she was never going to take his offer, and that she was never in the depowered position, because she says, well, I can just blacklist you. So if that was always in her pocket, then she was never, then this whole like, is she going to contract to the guy and become his possession, and the people treating her as possession has no meaning.
Right.
Because she was never like it's like, let's throw around some of the trappings of the patriarchy, but not the actual power differentials that make the patriarchy what it is. Let's talk about how slaves are there to get the girl into a dress as a joke, but not, still be admiring the beauty of this world.
I have to, I love Jane Espenson's stuff, but I have to admit that sensation that you're describing is something that I've had with her episodes on Buffy as well. And she only wrote Room with a View as far as I remember.
There are pieces there, like that Badger can't get in, and Badger is the one with the true working class accent that we recognize as a working class accent. But then but Mal has a different working class accent, and he does get in, and there's no explanation as to why.
Yeah.
And like there is the image of the the bowl of strawberries. So there's images of wealth, and it is in contrast with the people who are the folks who are like trading card games for chores. But again, it's like it's a soap bubble.
It reminds me a little bit of I think Jane's stuff is more fun than David Fury's, but I always felt that way about David Fury's stuff too, where it's sort of like the theme is there because it has to be, because the Mutant Enemy writers stressed theme, and theme was included in everything. So Angel's lonely, so now we'll have a loneliness demon, and then we'll talk about how you need people, and there we go. It's just that Jane is more delightful. But I have felt that way about in terms of the included theme of some of our other episodes as well. And I think you describe it perfectly.
And I think it's just, I think as much as I love it, and it's, you know, and there's the whole thing about, you know, they're laying track while the train is running. So, you know, you understand things.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of describing it. Yeah.
But but there's a couple topics that are kind of top shelf. You don't bring them in unless you're going to use them properly. One is sexual assault and one is slavery.
Yeah.
These are not things that you bring in lightly into a
These are not backdrop topics,
yes.
Right? That if you have those, one of the things I was discussing an episode of Outlander where they had an actual slave market. And yet, like, the narrative weight of that is huge. And it is like that, you know, it's a gravity. And when you la 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 and dance right by it, like, you just don't include it because it's right there. Like, you know, and so that becomes a real problem when we fail to see that topic has a huge narrative weight and we're just pretending it's not there. Like, it needs to be addressed because that's a big freaking deal. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, I don't believe anything should be off the table for material, but some stuff doesn't work as set decoration. And
yes,
the two that come to mind for me are, and
it's like the Nazis in Hero.
Yeah, Nazi racial purity demons.
Just like guess we're going there.
Oh, specifically the Schindler's List iconography that was used in that. But the one that, like, the contrast that comes to mind for me is like Beauty and the Beasts versus Untouched, where both of those are sort of related in terms of they both have flaws. One of them more than the other one, but one is a set decoration as an excuse to have werewolves and a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde story, and the other one is invested in the story of the one-off character. Lady Eternal, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I almost feel like I feel like that if they wanted to use this as a thing that they were going to build more into if they had more time, they shouldn't have pushed the use of it into so many different angles of this episode. Like, they mentioned the slave traders at the beginning, and like Mal is stealing from them and clearly making it that he, you know, regardless of the fact that he's a criminal, he considers these people like the same as the Alliance.
Criminal,
you know, so he's firmly, he's firmly in the camp that these slave traders are not people he wants to deal with. He's making nice so that he can steal from them, and then that's, you know, it's somehow evening up that they're making money. Like, he's not doing anything to stop them, which is contemptible, but it starts to draw that parallel that they probably would have developed later. And the line when he and Inara are training for the duel the next morning in his quarters, where he's saying, you think following the rules is going to buy you a nice life, and what it really does is makes you a slave. Like, I feel like that was also seeding that he feels like the Alliance made people slaves by creating this, you know, very structured society that if they weren't actual slaves, they were still they were in all but name. But then they throw in the fact that Persephone has slavery, that there's a segment of the population on Persephone that actually have slaves. And earlier in the episode, Wash was saying that Persephone could be their second home. Like, I feel like it's too much. I feel like they were trying to push that so hard to make that an element of the episode, that it was taking that incredibly serious subject actually far too lightly. If they had backed off on it, they would have been able to give it the gravitas that it needed, because they would have been planning for future seasons with it.
Yeah.
And that's an element of these discussions too, is how much of this was seeding for future plot arcs that they never had time to do because Fox did what they did.
There's an episode of Babylon 5 that I think gets it right in an interesting way. There's a lot of that show is about fascism and stuff, and also there's a whole thing of colonialism where there's one race that has been enslaved by the other. But yeah, it's complicated. Anyway, so Jakar, who's been colonized, is telling the story of his backstory, and he brings in a lot of elements and references to things that we would see as, part of the Jim Crow era and then that sort of stuff. And so they're sort of bringing that in as doing the sort of bringing it in as metaphor that people do. But then he specifically talks about how this is a thing that happened on, populations on Earth dealt with this sort of thing before these, and references specific instances. So it's like, it's not using it as allegory. It's saying we're using these are things that happen in life, and so we are using them in story, but we're not substituting the allegory for the real life. We're not treating the real life ones as something like.
I mean, I'm reminded of Judy and Are You Now or Have You Ever? The way in which that story invests in Judy's character and Judy's plight. It's not simply access to Angel's perspective, but it writes them as kindred spirits and cares as much about Judy by the end of the episode as we do about Angel. Like, again, handling issues of racism and discrimination in that particular story in a way, but
or Measure of a Man.
It works. Oh, Measure of a Man's a wonderful one.
Yeah. Where we get Whoopi Goldberg actually doing the one talking about, describing slavery, and actually they give it the weight. If you're
I love that episode.
Like slavery, you have to give it the weight that it has.
Neurosophy in chat. By the way, Russell, I see your question. I'll bring it up in a minute. Neurosophy in chat says we do get Jamestown, which is true. The show seems very like its intention was to deal with culture, society, structure in that way. There are attempts at many different tiers to sort of at least engage in the conversation about it. And Jamestown is a really interesting way of, especially through Jane's character, a way of examining the morality and ethic of the whole thing. But we'll get there. I'm not sure how to segue away from slavery.
Well,
it is a beautifully crafted soap bubble. We can talk about the beauty of the soap bubble.
Yeah. What is the significance of the chandelier? That's something I haven't gotten yet. Is that just a?
I think I think that's a real device. It's not a. You in the chat. You in the watch the rewatch. You were saying,
is it a hologram or is it a?
Might be a hologram, but no, that's an actual. For a second, I thought you were saying that wasn't a computer graphic. I was like, you are not watching the HD versions of this. That's true.
Yeah, but is that sort of an Austin mainstay, or what is the deal with the chandelier? Anyone have any theories?
I think it's just the trapping
showing off. Yeah,
showing off.
Yeah.
Austin,
and it's cool looking.
Pun.
I think it's also a vehicle to kind of allow Kaylee to start giving some exposition of how, how fancy she finds everything, and it lets her start saying things like, there's hot cheese over there and stuff like that, like highlighting how much this is a life that she wants, and she finds it so incredibly fancy, which leads up to the confrontation with the Mean Girls.
Mean Girls 30-30.
Yeah.
I
was thinking when
go ahead, Tom.
You were talking about the reason Mal took Kaylee, and I'm thinking, those Mean Girls against Zoe, we would have probably had I think Zoe and Banning would have had the duel in that case.
Yeah. Well, Zoe never would have engaged,
That's true.
I also think Zoe would have been in a slinky dress.
Yeah, I love that. I love the contrast of Zoe, but again, I love the show don't tell of him bringing her. Is such a nice bit of atonement. Mal's such an interesting, flawed character. I did
but she was busy.
She was busy. She was very busy. I did the Slayerfest 98 podcast with Ian Carlos last week. We talked about Surprise and Innocence, and I just blanked. I'm sorry. Someone bail me out.
That's okay. And I the only thing I can say about Zoe in this episode is, one, I absolutely love the dirty look that she gave Mal, which he started to realize that he messed up, and then she gave him that look, and he's like, and in that moment he knew he fucked up.
I remember what it was. We were talking about. We've heard from fans that that a number of people who say they really don't like Helpless, and really like Giles would never do that. I hate that. I love Helpless because again, talking about images of specifically images of men making mistakes, and then Giles at the end of the episode saying, "Whatever I need to do to earn back your trust, I will do." And it is a heinous, awful. It's a very tough episode.
Yeah.
But that final moment feels that moment of tenderness between the two of them as he's sort of cleaning her up feels earned. And we do see consequences for Giles and his behavior in that episode later on through the episode. But again, I feel like those representations of both Giles and Oz to a lesser degree. Oz doesn't really make mistakes until the final mistake, or his mistakes are cloaked in his Seth Greenness and hard to see. Well, I was kind of banking on you finding it charming. No, you didn't tell her that you have to repeat a grade. You just showed up. Which is such a I never realized it really foretells him his fatal flaw in the series. That moment I was pretty much banking on you finding me repeating a grade cute.
You see, he was trying to be charming, and it didn't work.
Right. Yeah. But
if he had been authentic, he would have been fine. He's not. He's trying to be. He's
when you try
trying out charming, and it's not working.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, I find the writing for Mal interesting because he says things that make me want to punch him in the face, but combined with, it does seem like there's actual retribution for it, and the Nathan Fillion of it all. I mean, Fillion is a Seth Green in that way. He seems to work. Does anyone else struggle with him, or feel like that line is walked pretty successfully?
Depends on the watch. I think I found him less and less charming over the years. I don't know. I think the Nathan Fillion has worn off. They just generally find Nathan Fillion less charming.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, but yeah, I don't know. I just sometimes he's just a real dick, and I don't. Maybe I don't find myself as charmed by their chemistry as I used to be.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's supposed to be. You've got your Beatrice and Benedict, right?
Yeah, but Beatrice and Benedict were always equals, and I don't know. There's something about the way that he that he just puts down her everything about her life and her career and her work and everything, and just continues to call her a whore when she's very clear that she's not okay with that. And I really dislike the possessiveness that he shows here. Even though he seems to be
unaddressed
about his own, like, I like that he's sort of conflicted about his possessiveness. That he says, I don't have a right to ask, but he's still asking. And he is still treating her like he doesn't even look to see if he isn't even looking at her in that confrontation with Atherton before he punches me. Like, it's not, they're measuring dicks. They're not, it's not actually about his, it doesn't feel like it's about her. It
Russell
feels
says,
like, and nor does he object to the guy saying, well, if you protect your property this well, then you may protect mine.
Oh, I didn't even catch that line that he refers to.
The language is, it's if you're willing to fight that hard to protect my property.
Yeah.
Russell says in chat, I agree with Sara. Yes! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Thank you. Yeah. I mean, there is something about it that doesn't quite work, but it is. I guess it works better for me than Xander does, which is my go-to. But I mean, I'm omitting Angel from that discussion as well.
Well, Mal is a grown-ass man. Xander is a boy.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I have a soft spot for Xander because I do see him growing, even though the writers seem to want to continuously erase that growth later on, when I think that it is genuinely finally earned, even though I think the learning lesson over and over and again. But like, there is a different I have a different expectation for a grown-ass man than a teenage boy.
That's a wonderful point. I think that gets blurry for me because Buffy characters are so often coded as adults. And Charisma Carpenter immediately when they move her to Angel does not feel like the Cordy from her senior year of Cordy, those first 2 seasons is a wonderful character, but she's definitely does not feel 19 in terms of the way the writing has coded her. So I guess I forget that Mal is definitely a grown-ass man, so expectations are a little bit different in that way.
Also, like, he's the captain, so there is an imbalance of power.
Yeah. Well, I think that the show tries to show that Inara is the powerful one, but the at least in terms of society, what it suffers from is that she's living in Mal's home, and so Firefly has the Buffy thing where every episode is actually about Buffy, even the ones that are on the surface of it about Xander or Willow, they're actually about something Buffy's going through with Angel that season or what have you. And I think that applies to Firefly with Mal, where which undercuts the theme here, as you pointed out, which is that it ends up being more about Mal than it ends up being about Inara, and sort of her inner conflict of is she going to stay or is she not going to stay is negated by the end of the episode. It's just about Mal's character growth. So
yeah, I think maybe we needed a bit more tell about the actual politics of the world we're dealing with, because I think it's always unclear to me what her standing is. Because there is sort of like that she's a lady, but also there's I don't know. It's just I need in as much as they explain so much of the world, I think that there are aspects of the world that don't get explained that I think would make a lot of difference.
For sure.
I agree. And I think that there's also a lack of context for understanding how companions are perceived on fully alliance worlds as opposed to in the worlds that we see that are out on the rim, that are not so directly under the control, where the Firefly crew are getting their jobs because things are not quite so regimented. It's very clear that that companions are something that are held in high esteem by the Alliance.
Right.
They make that clear in Bushwhacked. But
and Train Job has the strangers
Mhm.
awed by her when she comes and slaps Mal in the face.
And there's
so
reference to it in
is. Go ahead.
Yeah, and there's reference to it in the movie too, about the way that the Alliance views companions by the way that the operative acts when he shows up at the temple. But out on these other planets where apparently slavery goes on, whether it's legal in the Alliance or not is never actually clarified, but it's happening. We don't know how companions are treated there. Heart of Gold.
That might be
y-
the one episode I don't like of the show. And
That's one of my favorites.
I forget that it exists, but we'll talk about it when it gets there. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Heart of Gold's an interesting one, but Heart of Gold definitely makes it clear that on these outer planets, even though they're supposedly under Alliance control, they're not the places where sex work happens are not companion temples. They are bordellos.
Right.
They are whorehouses. So where is the distinction here? Where does one again? And there's so much that's they're baking in that they probably would have expanded on later. But so a lot of this probably suffers from just incomplete storytelling. But
Yeah.
There's a big difference in the way that Atherton views companions. Is that shared by the Persephone Society as a whole?
I see.
Or is that Atherton?
Yeah, I've always read him as a Parker-esque ass. But maybe I'm misreading because everyone else treats her with the dignity that he doesn't. She's never. They all wish. The second he says, "They all wish they could be in your bed tonight," and her look of how distasteful and gross that is for him to say, that is the. Other than Mal, which is the sort of like mirror thing they're going on there between the two of them, like you can't have it both ways. Other than Mal, I can't think of other instances in the series where someone speaks to her that way. The one specifically that we've already had at this point is the interrogating officer in Shindig. He speaks to her with great dignity and respect. So Bushwhack, thank you. The way I've always read it is that Atherton is just an ass. But again, I don't know. And the show is, both one of its strengths and weaknesses for the purposes of this discussion. It just throws the audience in the deep end. Don't know what the rim is? You'll figure it out. Wheel never stops turning, Badger. That only matters to people on the rim. This is an instance where the show might suffer from that. For sort of, especially like if you're going to drive an episode into themes of this nature, then maybe that should have been a little bit more clear.
Although they do make clear fairly early on that the outer colonies, they terraform the planet and then throw people on there and then kind of forget about them.
Yeah.
And maybe send a ship around to collect taxes, because that's why else would you have people, have any care about any of them at all out there. But
yeah, that's foundational knowledge for sort of why the space western motif is what it is.
Yeah.
And then they, in my mind, they sort of just, why are people speaking partly in Mandarin and sometimes Cantonese by accident? I've read. Why are there no Asian people in the show except at spaceports? So on and so forth. You had to read the dust jacket to get some of that information, where maybe that would have been revealed later on in the show. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Harris, in terms of the dueling, I wanted to ask you, is it stage fighting or that you or you just have a sword because having a sword is awesome?
I mean, this. Okay, so I guess there's three answers to that. This, I collect swords.
Oh,
So
cool.
this is one of the swords that I own that I collect. I have dabbled in fencing. I did a bit of it when I was at uni. Would like to do more, but executive dysfunction does not serve well for hobbies. We've got to travel large distances to a fencing place, but I did fence for as much as I could for a wee bit. So I think I could probably hold my own.
Do better than Mal did.
I like to think I would. But one of my notes I wrote during a watch through is I'm surprised that his win was allowed as legitimate. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that Mal wins and often gets humiliated, but don't know why that would really count as a win. Like, I mean, if it was fencing, it definitely wouldn't. Like, it would in all kind of, you know, Atherton won that, and then he got distracted after the match had technically ended, and then gets whacked in the face.
Yeah, it feels a little for the purposes of the story, but if we're talking about rules here,
yeah, I don't know. I think it seems a bit. Maybe it's a bit Jukes Ex Machina for me, but I guess it's the context of it. But yeah,
well, Mal,
did you have any other notes on the episode?
The only other one I had was I do like, and it happens for a show, and it's I pointed out the controversion that for all that Mal is a cowboy who hates civilization, he does seem reasonably competently familiar and knowledgeable about how to handle himself in not all situations, obviously, because he didn't know about the challenge. But until that point, like the part where he actually knows the dance, and you know,
oh yeah, that's
how to like hold himself, and kind of more or less how to like speak to the client. I mean, he didn't recognize the shafts, so his knowledge isn't complete. But you know, he wasn't coming across as kind of bravado.
His ignorance of it seems willful rather than uneducated. You know, to rebellious to spit in the face of society, but when he reaches for the tool, it's there. But it's interesting, the Kaylee's lust for the dress. And for fine things, if she's to be read as a part of his character, how that sort of fits into Mal's rebel nature, and is that actually his desire for Inara and to be a part of her life? I mean, I'm not sure exactly how to parse out the symbol there. If Kaylee is in fact an aspect of Mal's personality,
I guess. I think there's a general mix of, because like obviously Inara's from like an alliance, like she comes from the alliance kind of a place. Jane probably doesn't, but it's clear he didn't fight against it either. He's kind of agnostic towards it. So I guess, and I don't know where book. I mean, I think I haven't read the comics, but from what I've read of the comics, I think he was a brown coat, wasn't he? But it was something like a spy. I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, Mal kisses the cross during the battle. He kisses his crucifix during the battle, and I think Book is supposed to be symbolic of his lost faith in that particular bit. But in terms of reading Kaylee in this episode, it may be I'm reading too deep, which is what I do. But
that was your serious voice.
Yeah,
it was.
I shouldn't have given away the secret.
Well, everybody gets distracted by the pretty.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then he gets impatient with them all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tom, I think I interrupted you. You were going to say something there. That's okay if not.
Yeah, I was just I do want to mention my two favorite scenes in the show. In this show, Kaylee surrounded by the guys talking about different machines and such and vehicles and such, and you know, engines. I think they're talking about engines. She said, "Oh, the 780. You know, that's the that's the same machine. They just put a new plating on it. You know." And so they're all charmed by her, of course, because you know it's Kaylee. And then the scene in the ship when they're talking about we need a diversion, and
Oh God, yeah.
and talk her little talk with Badger, and just like absolutely charming.
Yeah, and Jane, that there is the diversion we might have been talking about.
Diversion.
Yeah.
Am I the only one that in that scene where, you know, she's saying anyone from old Titan colony knows, when she's clearly mimicking what's supposed to be the accent from that colony, but the actual subtitles for the closed captioning call it outright a Cockney accent? Am I the only one that thinks back to the Doctor Who line? You sound like you're from the north. There's lots of places with a north.
Multiple planets have a north. That was complete. No, but it's
A for effort.
It's a hard one.
Yeah,
it's a hard one. But that always immediately brings me back to that moment, and that's really one of the first. That was one of the first signals for me that what she was doing was actually psychic, because she was mirroring him.
Oh yeah, that's something we haven't touched on. I was thinking about that while we were watching that. Is this one of the first big tells, or have I missed one?
For me, it was
at this point. Yeah, the fact that she read him, and how else, and why didn't that raise a red flag to the other people in the crew? Like, how else would she have done that?
I don't know. She's quirky.
Well,
yes, quirky.
She is. Well, she's quirky, but she's also a super genius.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Who could also be very much, she could probably do languages. You know, if there were more than two languages, if there was more than English and Mandarin with a little Cantonese accidentally, then she'd probably be a linguistic genius as well.
Rationalizing that she's improving the characterization from knowledge of this because she's a super genius.
Yeah,
she might be doing the Sherlock Holmes thing and just reading what she sees.
Yeah.
In Bushwhacked in the last episode, she just read of the trauma, but that's interesting because that's after it's happened. She's not reading anyone. Well, maybe she's reading the survivor, possibly. But at the time, it's kind of played as if she's hearing the past screams of the people who've been.
Well, that's revealed in the editing, but wouldn't have necessarily been a flag for the other characters. And the her standing in the back of the ship during the cold open and hearing the conversation and saying the ship is not empty or something to that effect is not overheard by the other characters. But this one feels particularly explicit. The first time I watched it, I kind of thought mutant enemy shows are a wealth of attempts at accents, and I kind of wondered at her attempt at the accent, but listening to it this time, it sounds pretty good to me. The problem is not the accent. The problem is she's speaking to Mark Shepard, who has the most gravitas voice of Gravitas Town. That man being of diminutive stature and the voice of a giant.
Yeah. Although you do have the excuse about accents from then is that they've evolved for accents for however many hundreds of years. So who knows? Maybe her accent is absolutely pristine, and maybe he's putting on an accent.
And Harris, I just want to acknowledge you're smiling, and we're talking about accents when you're in a room full of people who probably have an accent to you. Just want to acknowledge
I'm the English person here.
Yeah.
I guess. But I'm on the wrong side of the country for it. But I mean, I from what I've heard people say, Summergallow's accent's pretty. I mean, it sounds spot on for me. I don't hear any American tells.
Yeah, what I misinterpreted is just Mark Shepard, right? So Mark Shepard-y, and obviously she's not going to sound that way. It's not her accent; it's just the differences in their voice.
Mark Shepard isn't Cockney.
I think she does a really great job.
Well, having friends with genuine Cockney accents, it's not too bad. It's It's not on the Dick Van Dyke scale.
Or the
Dick Van Dyke had the greatest accent of all time in Mary Poppins, so that's authenticity to its height.
Or the Angel Irish accent scale.
It's
a little more close.
A friend of mine's dad, I had a friend who was Cockney, whose dad was a Cockney sailor, like they were full on, and we used to entertain ourselves by doing the Dick Van Dyke accent around her.
Let me. We're kind of getting towards the end here. Let me go back to Russell's question. He says, "Just curious. Russell, thank you for the donation, by the way. The buttons are down right now, so I appreciate you.
Dance of capitalist superiority.
Do the dance of capitalist superiority. I always wondered Mal is somewhat of a chauvinist in the way he deals with certain team members, and yet when he plays Caleb, it's even worse. So my question is, did he bother you of your rewatch of Firefly? Yeah, he's awful. I mean, the thing of it is the description I've heard of it is like it's like hearing a panda use the C word. You know, like Nathan Fillion, to me, all right, I've learned from this conversation that there aren't as many people as me is easily swayed by his charmingness. Fine, I acknowledge that. But so Caleb is so despicable and disgusting. Yeah, it's like, for me, watching it, it's tough. It's like watching a panda curse. And it's not a problem with his performance. It's just like I'm sucked in by his nature. But I'm a huge Castle fan, too, so it's not purely based on that. Go ahead, Lady Eternal.
I will say that, for me, the dissonance in this episode was not the difference between Caleb versus Mal. Because... when I was rewatching Firefly, it was after I had seen season 7, so it was more like seeing him playing a character that was not that cold, hard, as Caleb was very nice. It was, for me, it was actually Atherton's character, because the actor that plays him played Duncan Idaho in the Sci-Fi Channel's adaptation of Children of Dune.
Huh.
Very, 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 yes, very, very, very different character from Atherton. And, anybody that's familiar with Dune and Duncan Idaho, knows that he was very honorable. His devotion to House Atreides and all the rest of it. Like, even if you've seen the new ones, you can kind of tell he's a very different character from the character that Atherton is. And seeing this actor who had played this really stalwart, honorable person, then shifting and playing this floppy-haired douchebag.
TM.
Was so weird
TM,
for
yes.
me.
TM chipperish.
But Children of Dune, if you ever can find it, I think it's currently only on DVD. It's the only adaptation of anything past the first book in the Dune series. Has a lot to recommend it, including baby James McAvoy. So just so everybody's aware, my shout out for that. Yes. Oh, and Lani, I think I remember hearing you say in the rewatch you were trying to remember. Yes, Mark Sheppard was in Supernatural for many, many seasons.
Yes, I didn't see him though. Like, we only watched the first 5 seasons, so I wasn't sure if I had seen him or not. But I know he was there.
You had.
I thought I had, but I don't remember a lot of it.
Yeah. He was in a few episodes in season 5. You started seeing him more heavily in season 6 onward. But he was in a few episodes in season 5. So yes, you did see him. I am the Supernatural geek in the group, just so everybody knows.
I have watched 11 seasons of Supernatural. I enjoy it, and I got Jack hooked on it. He's currently on season 7. But it can be a challenging sell. Go ahead, Sara.
So in regards to Caleb, I find him kind of cartoonish. Like, he's disgusting and vile and misogynist, but in such an on the nose way that it is a bit cartoonish, and it does, like, no part of me is unaware that I'm watching a performance.
Hmm.
As opposed to somebody like Atherton or Warren, who feel
Ugh.
so every day, like, and just like they feel like they have the whole of the patriarchy behind them.
Sure.
And they're just so many of them. That, and yeah, like Caleb feels closer to me to the "but you're a girl," and I've met the "but you're a girl" guys.
I think the thing that for me
they
that
feel more real.
Yeah, the thing that is disturbing for me is the violence in season 7. I have a particular allergy to violence, and the violence, Caleb's violence, is disturbing in a way for me that I'm not into horror, and it's disturbing for me in a level that you're right. A lot of the sexism in the show is more of the "you want me to work it off for you, peaches" variety, and I think Caleb falls more in that realm than the other one. The thing that affects me is the violence of it in that season.
Whereas the "you're gonna work it off" guy, like, those are everywhere.
The passing, yeah, as
Like,
opposed to being a big bad or something that is
I know you found them a bit on the nose. No, like those guys are a bit on the nose, but they're also really, really real.
Sure. The thing that's frustrating to me then is that
and much more common than the Caleb guys.
The show offers.
Thank goodness.
The show offers
Yeah.
the big, broad, on the nose versions of it, but then is blind to some of the entrenched versions of it in the show. That's my struggle. Is not that those guys exist, but that the show offers it those as commentary, but then ignores its own internalized misogyny through other stories. Is the reason why I grumble more at the butt slappy on the nose versions, where it's like, and yet you're going to ignore X, Y, and Z in these particular stories. That's the rub for me.
It's not that I'm not saying, like, they're in the comments are saying, but that kind of the Calebs of the world exist. Yes, but they exist within a system, which I think Caleb doesn't in the story. That's what makes him cartoonish, is that he's sort of it's misogyny embodied. It's such a pure kind of disembodied misogyny, which completely ignores that there are whole systems that supported and created, and so, like, that's why to me it feels cartoonish, because it, like, there's a sense, like, the on the nose in terms of, like, where you can work it off. There's a whole diner full of people ignoring that happening.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, like, we're not getting, we're not getting what actually goes to keeping the Caleb guys up, so he just comes off as evil.
Yeah.
And it just like, it works for the story, but I find the everyday and the systemic much more threatening, because it is much more real.
Sure, fair enough.
It's much more insidious because people also, the super overt Caleb type abuse, and people are like, "Ooh, that's bad," and then they go and they do the covert stuff, and they're like, "Oh, it's cute, it's cute and it's funny and all that kind of stuff." And I think that that's where you end up getting a lot more insidious harm done, where people are like, "Oh, but it's cute when we do this. It's cute when Xander said." No, it's not, and so that extreme covert versus overt versus covert, I think, is a big part of where that gets disturbing,
And maybe if he was an actual priest, it would feel more real, but he's not. He just wears the costume.
Right.
Like,
I was just thinking that if they had portrayed him as being a member of the priesthood in Sunnydale, especially considering the fact that Sunnydale, they keep talking about, it has so many churches because it's on a hellmouth. If they had portrayed him as being an actual priest in Sunnydale that was taking the opportunity to take out these potentials as they're getting into town, and it's under the cover of being a part of this religious organization, and that would have been a way to insert him into the patriarchy instead of making him an outsider, like an outlier in the
He should have been a watcher.
Yeah,
The watcher, the whole watcher thing is incredibly sexist and incredibly misogynistic. Why not make Caleb a freaking watcher? That would have been interesting.
Awesome.
And then
he would have gotten blown up.
Yeah, him blowing up the Watchers Council feels more connected and motivated. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about the actors on Buffy or the actors on Angel, the one that feels to me more a little more strange is whenever I see Jasmine. She's terrific, but I always feel like she's smiling an awful lot. Is Zoe okay? Jasmine's so smiley.
You
saw more Zoe smiles in this episode than we did in a lot of other ones.
Yeah. With Wash in a private space with the door closed. Like
we
even that her
but not locked apparently.
Her vulnerability is specific and allowed in a particular context at a particular time, and the rest of the time she's on guard, and that's her character. And I love the vulnerability in this scene. I think it's one of the best scenes in the thing. But yeah, whenever I see Jasmine, I'm like, so I have to make the adjustment for the first 5-10 minutes of and I love the Jasmine arc. Oh my god, is it a relief from the first part of the season 4 arc for me? But just thinking about Firefly actors appearing in other stuff, that's the one that comes more to mind to me. Then season 7 has other problems besides Caleb. I kind of lump him into some of the issues with that season itself. But before we go, go ahead, Lady Eternal.
I was just going to say that we're not allowed. I mean, this is not a place for thirst, so we're not allowed to actually talk about how that scene opens.
Which scene?
The one with Zoe in it where she's smiling a lot.
Oh, right.
Well, that rule is because we've had people in the comments be creepy about people in the
stream. we've had people commenting about people who come to these, and that's something I definitely want to avoid. Before we go, Sara C, I wanted to give you a chance if you had any points you wanted to shout out about the episode or things, or.
Oh, I mean, it was just going in a different direction. I was happy to listen. That's probably a good thing to do once in a while.
Oh, sure. Was there something else you wanted to get back to?
I mean, at this point, like it was a longer discussion, but I like the episode. I have a very common opinion. I like the episode. It's one that I am always really excited to get to when I'm watching with people because they're all good. But I'm like, this one's really, really fun because I tend to like the ones that are. If you can separate the ones that are on a planet versus in space for some reason, I like the electricity and the warmth of seeing people interactions versus sort of, I don't know, the claustrophobia of Bushwhacked doesn't work as much for me. And my other take, which, is maybe surprising, maybe not. I like Mel. I know that he's an ass, but I like him, which maybe is against my usual type, but there's something about his gruff fatherness that I really enjoy. The sound of tiny feet and army boots. Shut up! He's fun. I like Mel, so
I'm right there with you.
That's what I got. I like the episode, and I like Mel.
He's definitely the dad of the ship, and I love walk away from this table.
I enjoy that.
Yeah.
I love him too, Sara. Honestly, I do.
He's my dad.
As much as he is an ass, and I want to shake him until his teeth rattles for some of the stuff he says.
Oh, absolutely. At
the end of the day, it's I don't back down from a fight. You do all the time. Well, I'm not backing down from this one.
Yeah. It's that he's a little stupid and incompetent, and there's a lot of beats specifically around Kaylee that are really endearing when he and her are like. Did you see what she's wearing? Whatever they say, she's like, yeah, she looks adorable. Yeah, but don't tell her. It's really cute. I like anything that's they're a little family. He's when he kisses her head, and he's kissing girls makes you sleepy. It's I can't help myself. It's very brotherly or fatherly, and I enjoy it a lot. But
yeah, I love they don't have a will they or won't they relationship, and I wish that there were more.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. I mean, again, to me it always read more as Big Brother.
Yeah.
That's
there's
And from what I hear, that's their kind of their the actors' relationship during filming when they were doing it. Nathan was very older brother type to Jewel.
Yeah, and I love that like Jane and Kaylee have a very older brotherly relationship.
Yeah.
I'd love seeing more of that because it does get exhausting. Like, okay, when are these characters gonna hook up? Like, it's just nice to see that represented more often.
And you even get a taste of that in this episode because Jane was looking for a reason to not just blow Badger's entire crew away when they first walked on the ship. And what was his reason? They had Kaylee hostage.
Yeah. And when the dude shoots Kaylee, the one that is immediately ready to go after him is Jane and says, "Get out of the way, preacher." I appreciate that relationship, and I appreciate that it is just more. Again, so much show, not tell. In Firefly.
And then, of course,
really wonderful.
In the same vein, in that same episode, when you have the scene of the doctor working on Kaylee, you have Jane sitting outside the operating room watching, and he's kind of like almost like rocking. He's really concerned about. He's really worried about Kaylee, and it's just here's this rough, tough guy, but he's like.
The position he's curled up in, Tom, what you're referring to, that sold the vulnerability to me more than anything else, is that rocking motion that he's doing where he's curled up,
like he's
wrapped around one leg. That thing you're talking about, that really sold it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I need to go ahead and end it there. Oh, sorry, see, go ahead. Yeah, one more thing.
Last thing, it's one sentence. I like Inara a lot.
Oh yeah.
You got two very, very simple statements for me. I like Inara.
Well, I think that
more to say it on
I think that sums up an Espenson quite a bit. Is her episodes are just very delightful. You can dig for the theme in Band Candy, or you can enjoy Rupert and Joyce going on a date and making out. And generally I choose to do the latter. Lady Eternal, go ahead.
One last thing from me, and I know I've been talking a lot in this episode, but
been a good discussion.
The fact that they carried through the strawberry thing in this episode does have two callbacks for me specifically. One is there was an old world European tradition in some countries of tying baskets full of strawberries to cows' horns during the spring as an offering to the Fae, because the Fae would then encourage them to have healthy calves and produce more milk throughout the year. And so the fact that the big bowl of strawberries at the beginning, and then the end of the episode, they're moving cows. I don't know if that was intentional, but that always struck me as really, really funny. And the other thing is that there is another old tradition, because strawberries are associated with lust and love. If you split a double strawberry and give the other half to someone else, supposedly sharing that double strawberry with them would make the two of you fall in love with each other. I almost wonder if they weren't going to use that as something that would have been between her and Simon if they'd had time.
Interesting. So she sort of lifts some strawberries and brings them back. That would have been cool.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Tom. And then we're gonna wrap up.
Yeah, this is just because this from the conversation much earlier in the discussion, and nothing have nothing to do with Firefly. We're talking about books, and human bondage, and in that scene, Buffy says, well, "I'm really not into porn." I mean, I'm cutting way back, thinking, okay, how much were you consuming if you had to cut way back? That's all I'm. That's what I'm wondering. That's all I'm. That's not a
valid question.
I'm just wondering.
It took me a second to recontextualize that question within the previous discussion, but once I did, I was like, okay, got it. All right, friends. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. Well, I appreciate you still working on Epiphany. In 2 weeks, Jack will be back, and we will be doing Safe. Hopefully, he comes back ready to go. I know he is sometimes stuff comes up for him. But other than that, I appreciate your time, and thank you, everyone in the chat. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great night. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.